Tom Quee presents The Royle Ramble, an episode-by-episode celebration of the classic British sitcom, The Royle Family. To get in touch with the show, email us at theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. Hey everyone, hey, it's Tom Quee here, back with the first episode in a long time, I think about 4 months or so, of The Royle Ramble. If you're not familiar with the show, this is myself going solo through, in my opinion, one of the greatest TV shows of all time, certainly one of the all-time classic UK shows, The Royle Family. We've been going one by one. We're currently on episode 5, so go back through the archive. And yeah, I just, go through the script, go through the episodes, discuss theories, play clips, talk about characters, pick up on any references culturally or otherwise, and just trying to, explore the show and celebrate the show as much as possible because, as I said in the early episodes, I couldn't believe there wasn't a podcast about this program. So I just feel there needs to be more discussion and appreciation around, this masterpiece. So just before we get into Another Woman, of course you can follow us on Twitter at Royle Ramble Pod. We have an email as well, theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. That is theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. And I've got 2 great emails to read out in a moment as well. Please leave us a review on iTunes. We've had quite a few 5-star reviews in the interim period, but still no written ones. I need this validation, people, please. So go over to iTunes, leave us a review there. Tell a friend about the show. We're on YouTube and we're on Spotify and just wherever your RSS feed will take you. So yeah, just prior to us discussing episode 5, let's get into the emails. Our first email comes from Paul Riding. He says, keep up the stellar work with the pod. I've watched every episode at least 50 times down the years. I'm a huge fan and it's great to hear someone else's perspectives. I find it, and Only Fools and Horses, to be the best possible comfort TV. I live in Hong Kong. Whenever I need a taste of home, I throw an episode on and inevitably begin another run. The show's beauty is in how everyone, especially people who grew up in that region, can relate to much of the banality of their evenings. I wouldn't trade those nights spent bullshitting on the couch for anything. Cheers, Paul. Well, no, thank you, Paul, and it's great to think of someone so far-flung listening to this show and appreciating the Royle Family, and it was great to hear from you. And, I completely agree. Like, this show is definitely a huge comfort to me as well. It's background, but I don't mean that in a dismissive way. Like, sometimes if I'm sitting down and I'm making notes, I can get really granular with it. But sometimes if I'm just chilling out, even if I'm just playing PlayStation or something, I just kind of like having it on. Like, it's just kind of one of those things. Like, we're going to encounter Davina McCall show that they have on in the background, and this show is God's gift, I would say, rather than that show. And our second email, our final email, comes from Daniel Hall, and he says, Hi Tom, just discovered the Royle Ramble and really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I love listening to the dissection of the show, which has made me ponder things I've never noticed or thought about before, such as the revelation of Jim's mom having died 15 years ago, making it likely that Anthony wouldn't remember her, making Nana the only Nana he's ever had. But I also find myself shouting at my phone when you skip over bits that I love or observations I've made. Apologies, Daniel. This is not a criticism of you, more a compliment to the show on how it operates on so many levels. One thing I like to put to you is that you either missed a great joke or I invented it in my head. A bit like the 2 interpretations of Jim's throwaway comment that Denise could have done worse by marrying her dad, which is what I discussed in a previous episode. Daniel continues, when Barb is sad that she won't be able to dance with Dave's dad, Jim says, quote, you could do knee up Mother Brown, not knees up. I always thought this was a dig at Dave's dad for being on the disability and having a peg leg or only one good leg at least. A great gag, I think, which goes almost unacknowledged on the show due to Jim's digs at Dave's dad being so commonplace. I'm looking forward to hearing the next 2 shows. I'm trying to ration myself due to the large gaps between episodes. Oh God, this was sent 2 months ago. So sorry, Daniel, there's still a bit of a gap until you listen to this one and future episodes. Dano from Chester. P.S. For what it's worth, my theory on the Tory mug, which is something I brought up in previous episodes, I don't really understand why the Royals have Tory tea in a mug. Like, you'd think they'd be Labour if anything. Dano says, for what it's worth, my theory on a Tory mug is that Jim's miserliness and unwillingness to throw away a perfectly good mug would trump his dislike for the Tories, assuming it was a free mug from some promotion or other. Now, Daniel, that is a great point, and I didn't really consider that, really like that, and also the knee up Mother Brown, for me, I was just thinking about kind of the inference of the song more than anything with the knees, but the fact that he drops the S off that, didn't catch that, very, very smart, and so guys, if you've got any emails to send, please get in touch, theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Alright then, and let's get into it. This is Another Woman from Series 1, written by Carolyn Ahern, Craig Cash and Henry Normal, directed by Mark Mylod, and originally broadcast on the 12th of October, 1998. And as we open, it's immediately clear that this is going to be a different type of episode to what we've seen before on the show. We're in a brand new location for one, Jim and Barbara's bedroom. And rather than a Royle or two being in front of the television, it's Barbara in front of her mirror, preparing for bed or slapping on Nivea, as the script says. This is a different beast of an episode as well, as there are actually multiple scenes. 6 by my count. There's still, of course, the long-form nature inherent in the whole show, but there's more of an out-and-out plot here that is fantastically told, rather than the somewhat more immaculately constructed casualness of the usual Royal Family offerings. Having the characters argue and separated is a great way of creating drama and new situations. I mean, think of the Millionaire episode that I keep mentioning in Series 2, where Barbara storms out. I mean, I know I keep bringing it a lot, but I cannot wait to ramble all over that one. It's a great opening shot, too, of Barbara speaking in media res, with Jim reflected in the vanity mirror, turned over on one side, of course, not really listening. Barbara's moaning about one of her co-workers. She's at the bakery now, of course, and seemingly Barbara has to do all the work outside the house as well. She gets very little help from her own flesh and blood indoors, and even her paid co-workers don't even pull their weight either. She calls her Titty for lol, which I couldn't really find much about online, but it's somewhat self-explanatory. You know, someone with a higher opinion of themselves, highfalutin, the same ambit as Lady Muck that we've gone into on previous episodes. And I love seeing this room, their bedroom. It has the same tired, muted, yellowed look of downstairs. Somewhat stale, stayed, lived in. And like the bureau in the lounge we explored in our last episode, Jim's birthday, the vanity mirror cabinet is stuffed with knickknacks on top of it. There's bottles of cream, perfume sprays, other skin or makeup products, a decorative mini statue too of a swan which reaches up, pushing its golden beak. I mean, I'll just pause this. This is only on screen for a few seconds, but hey, it's the Royle Ramble. You know I like to pour over this. Another ornament that's hard to make out. It looks like a stone statue of a foot or something. I mean, everything is so well thought of in this show. I'm not trying to get my psychoanalysis going on in terms of the placement or anything, but, you know, it's fun to scour and get a deeper impression of the lives of these people. Barbara gets up as she's speaking, and we see more of the room as she goes around the bed. There's drying clothes, a dim lamp. Another one of those paintings which looks like a James Whistler or a Turner copy, similar to the two that we've mentioned before, one of which hangs above the cabinet downstairs that Barbara fetches the dusty glasses out of for the old pomade. Barbara reveals her theory about her co-worker.
I'd done 4 trays of pasties before Titty for lol took her hands out of her pockets. You know what it is, though, don't you, love?
No, love, but I'm fascinated.
She doesn't want to work her.
Oh, well, that'll be it then, won't it?
And it's beautifully ironic, isn't it? Because as she says that line, it cuts to lay about Jim, trying to nod off. This is the first time we've properly seen him without his trademark specs. And, you know, Jim, he really does look tired here as he turns over with the floral duvet wrapped around him, the vest still on underneath. And, you know, it's a credit to Ricky Tomlinson here, his acting skill, that he does look shattered. I mean, arguably, though, this is probably Jim's, like, ultimate state, isn't it? This is perhaps one of his kind of, you know, dominant domains of just pure laziness, just being in bed. And, you know, like Ricky, we're about to see Carolyn Ahern and Craig Cash as well transform convincingly as they play drunk rather than Ricky playing tired. Barbara comes in with a toilet roll and uses a square to rub her face. She doesn't have facial wipes then, it seems. And this is maybe the toilet paper that we've heard about before, the one that's tearing Jim's arse to ribbons. Perhaps not best for using as an exfoliant then. Barbara continues to talk about how her co-worker's mind is on a new fella rather than the pasties. There's word perhaps of her leaving, she's with a married man, she has kids. And Jim, still in his slumbered state, can still get a little jibe in.
She'll be back. She'll be back for a job once he's chucked her. She thinks he's going to take her on with them 2 kids, and they're not even his. He'll never leave his wife for her. They never do they?
No, but some of them must be really tempted.
There's a nice detail here of the camera close-up on Jim and him scrunching his nose as he tries to get back to sleep. But, of course, any chance of that is chucked out the window as down below Denise and Dave enter with a slam. It's a little difficult to actually hear what they're saying. You can pick out a few phrases and words here and there. And the script itself doesn't make it clear, so maybe they improvise this in the moment. Here's what the script says. It says, front door slams downstairs, muffled sound of Denise shrieking, and then muffled sound of Dave and Denise arguing throughout the rest of the scene. I love how Barbara says, that sounds like our Denise. Sounds like Dave's with her. I mean, who else could it be at this hour in their own home? She's lit a cigarette now, and she explains that this time next week they'll be married. I mean, Jim says, ironically, that they already do sound like they're married on account of the Barney they're having. Something that Barbara doesn't immediately cut on to, but this does sound like a loud one, a vicious one, and Dave is giving as good as he gets.
Do you know, I can't believe this time next week them two will be married.
Sounds as though they're already married.
You don't think they're having a row, do you? Oh, yeah, they are. They're having a row.
I love that the writers here decided to have such conflict in the penultimate episode of the first season. It's a final test of sorts before it all comes to fruition. The camera angles as well in this room are brilliant. They keep switching here, to and fro. Jim with his schlubby form underneath the duvet, looking towards Barbara and a triptych of mirrors. And it's here that we see her reflected from a multitude of angles, listening with a cigarette in hand, staring into the doorway. This is, of course, a situation between Dave and Denise that we know has happened at least once before, as it's mentioned in the second episode.
Were you and Dave arguing last night?
Yeah. He was doing me head in. He won't talk proper about the wedding.
But what's there to talk about? I'm paying for the bloody lot, his dad's paying for nothing.
But this time it seems Barbara is going to go downstairs and Jim is even ushering her down. Okay, he's ushering her down for the 40 winks, but, I think they can tell as well that this is a particularly nasty one. It's quite het up. And, perhaps if Jim and Barbara didn't go down, maybe we wouldn't have a wedding. Who knows? Jim urges her down. Anthony yells downstairs, unseen at this point. And they're really bawling at each other. I mean, you can hear Dave doing that classic fella riposte to any argument. Oh, yeah. I'm sure we've all done that in our past, to our embarrassment. And then, from Barbara's final puff upstairs, and a nod, we cut straight to Denise, stubbing out a ciggy on the table. We can also see, and again, this show, it's like doing this podcast is really... I've always idolised this show, don't get me wrong, but it's like... When you're watching with a podcaster's eye, you just notice little things here. And I'm sure many of you listeners out there had seen this before, but I didn't spot this. So this episode clearly is meant to be on a Friday night, late on a Friday night where they've been out after work or whatever, or after Dave's work, I should say. So Denise is stubbing out the ciggy on the table, and we see lottery tickets as well, which makes sense, I suppose. This is Friday, set for the Saturday draw, etc. Denise, rings on all her fingers, band of jewellery. I mean, this shot is so terrifically constructed with such care. There's a yellow light beside a golden pack of Benson and Hedges. There's a puzzler also, its cover overturned. But of course, the soon-to-be newlyweds are going at it.
If you think I'm marrying you now, you pig, I'm not. Look. Well, a load of lads fancy me, right, and I never bother with them.
Well, bother with them then if you want to.
I don't want to.
Denise pulls her ring off and slams it down on the table. And, it's great here to see what they're wearing as well. They're in totally different costumes to how we normally see them. Dave with his shiny black shirt ensemble, classic DJ look, bit of gel in his hair that old school blokes of a certain age and year 8 boys have. When you sort of do the tuft up at the front, get it all aquiline. Denise, I mean, you guys know that I think... in a completely admiring way, that Carolyn Aherne Denise is just beautiful, very striking. And here, she's dusky. She's almost gothic, her shock of blonde against the entirely black ruffled ensemble. Both in costumes, as I say, that we've never seen before, and both in ways that we've never seen them either. That being pissed. Denise brings up the fact that loads of lads fancy her, and you do believe it, of course, but she's so distraught. Her voice freighted with tears, and the source of it all? Well...
Every time we see Beverly Macker, it's the same. You love flirting with her. I saw your face and you love it.
I'm not even talking about this crap.
Yeah, well, I could wear a dead tight top and a really short mini skirt, but I don't, because I've got more respect for myself. But you don't. You don't respect me.
And as Denise says that, we see the light go on in the hall. She pulls out another ciggy. Dave, interestingly, is sitting in Jim's chair as he listened, slightly away from her, rather than glued up beside her as we normally see them in the lounge together. His blue jacket's on the armrest, and he's sitting like Jim, legs sprawled open, laid back, listening in disbelief. And Carolyn Aherne, I mean, everyone is an amazing actor in this show, but she's really in that, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen this, when someone is hysterical and drunk. And it just creates such a chaotic medley of emotions there. And she's absolutely nailed this. It feels so real. There's not a moment where I feel like she's acting and she's just pretending to be a bit, no. She seems absolutely bereft. Her voice cracked, hampered by emotions. And as Denise says that Dave doesn't respect her, Barbara enters and starts to stroke her hair. We can see Denise's mascara's run. I mean, she really looks devastated. And Barbara is in full mama bear mode here, protecting her young and going straight for Dave.
Oh,
Oh, Dave, what have you done now?
I've done now.
She's not crying for nothing, is she?
She's not crying for nothing. I mean, Barbara, as we've discussed on previous episodes, can be quite selective with her memory. You know, she just wants the best for her kids. Like, think about the little thing they had about the boots being broken and her paying for them and her knowing where this is going to go. And in the last episode where Denise has a hangover and, you know, she's being waited on hand and foot, but of course she was just hungover. So she probably knows deep down that Beverly Macker has done something. And just, like, what does Beverly think of Denise, by the way? I've often thought this, like, Beverly lives in Denise's mind rent-free, but does Beverly even care? You know, is Dave really, like, you know, one of the ones that she's really after? I mean, she's got 2 kids, let's not forget as well. So, but of course Barbara, she's the mama bear, as I said, so she's going to care about her daughter. And Dave, you know, somewhat fairly explains himself, saying that he was a DJ, she was asking for a record. Apparently he was saying, all right, darling, to her, but, you know, again, it's that kind of DJ vernacular, isn't it? He did give her a kiss, though.
Was I, Al? I'm a DJ, right? She was asking me for a record.
Yeah, all right, darling, he kept saying to her. And why? Why did you have to kiss her when she left?
She came over to me.
And the way she says that is so tragic, isn't it? I mean, this truly is her worst nightmare come to life. Not only is Beverly Macker in the mix, but she's apparently coming for Denise's fiancé as well. She came over to Dave, supposedly. I mean, and you can imagine Denise just looking at her with daggers. And the acting here, I just want to again focus on the acting. I mean, to act drunk convincingly is so difficult, but both of them, I mean, Carolyn Aherne especially, but Craig Cash as well, are just sublime here. I mean, the inebriation is effortless and breathtaking, and just, you know, I love kind of the direction this whole scene went in and how they're just really playing with the idea of the characters and also the setting as well. Of course, this is really late at night. I think this is supposed to be, well, it's referenced that it's like 1 a.m. before, so, you know, it must have been quite late if Denise had 9 pints or whatever. And next up is one of my favourite moments from the episode. I mean, it has everything. It has drunken Denise. It has that kind of twisted logic when you're really, really upset. It's silly. Lots of fecal matter going on. I mean, it's just magnificent.
Every time when I come out of the toilet, right, she was round him like flies, right, round shit. And you're the shit. And she's not even the fly because she's too fat to be the fly. And she's the shit. And that's what they are, the 2 shovels of shit. And that's it.
You don't have to bring shit into it, love. Here.
Too fat to be the fly. I love that. I mean, technically, it's not an insult because everyone's too fat to be a fly, but it's awesome. As I say, lots of shit talk a la Jim. Barbara slightly scolds her for bringing shit into it and passes a tissue. Denise focuses on talk of the wedding and Dave never being bothered. We've heard about this, of course, in the second episode as well, that he was more interested in his kebab than the wedding stuff. And Dave just can't be doing with this. I mean, you know, we've seen Dave, everything we've seen of Dave has just been him kind of gormless on the arm of the sofa. Like, you know, he has a bit of wit about him, he likes to joke around with Jim and that sort of stuff, but we haven't really seen him in these heightened emotional states, and we don't actually see him as he was when he came storming into the house when they heard him upstairs. Like, we're seeing Denise still in that mode, but Dave has kind of mellowed out. Dave, I mean, you don't want to argue with your fucking fiancé in front of your mother anyway, but you can tell Dave's kind of been down this route before, knows how it's going to go, is just kind of playing it out at this point. So he says that he can't be doing with it, goes to go, grabs his coat, Barbara stamps her foot down. I mean, remember, we discussed this in the last episode, there was a cut line about Dave being done for drink driving, whose omission gives this attempt a little more oomph, I think. Jim is called as a warning, and the way Barbara says Jim, by the way.
Well, you can't drive, can you? You've had a drink.
I'm all right.
You're not all right. Jim!
It's like a penetrating foghorn, good lord. Dave rolls his eyes and collapses back in the chair, ready to stay, at least for the time being. But Denise says she doesn't mind. She wants him to go and kill himself for all she cares. Barbara says she doesn't mean that, which of course she doesn't. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of how Dave wouldn't share his crunchy, and then Denise says something like, I'm not going to marry you if you do, and Barbara says that's a silly reason not to get married. You know, it's kind of, again, Barbara just can't quite ever not take things on face value. She can't kind of just understand the sort of laissez-faire jokiness that you can just have in any relationship, big friendship or carnal or whatever, you know. But that's part of her charm. So Barbara says that she doesn't mean that, and she's just so attendant to Denise here, hands on her shoulders gently, dabbing her eyes. And Dave is trying to be a bit more logical though, and he points out the pattern of why this always happens. But Denise has no interest. She continues to go in on Beverly, continues to sneer, her voice getting caught up. She's shooting Dave evils. Barbara's wiping her tears. And then from upstairs, we can hear Jim stumbling down, and eventually he enters the lounge. Still, he's got his glasses off, looking very tired. Again, I'm just impressed by how tired Jim looks in this episode. And he puts a cardigan on over his vest as he comes in. And, he pretty much instantly, as is Jim's wont, says the wrong thing when he asks what's going on.
What's going on now?
Oh, they're arguing about Beverly, Macca.
Right, Beverly, she's a tasty little piece.
Jim!
Something to tell you, Dad. I'm not getting married on Saturday.
Well, that's a few bob saved anyway. Right, come on, let's get to bed.
Jim!
He is, though, I must say, and we see this throughout the series, but I think this episode may be one of the best examples. Actually quite good sometimes at this parenting lark. And, he's pragmatic throughout this 30 minutes, and he kind of sees through the hyperbole and bloated statements for what they are, and he brings everyone's emotions back down to the ground. It's, like when Denise weepily tells her dad that the wedding is off, and Jim talks about saving a few bob on the wedding, or when Dave says that he's not canned up.
I'm not canned.
Oh, why, what have you been drinking? Bloody water?
Barbara, who's been trying hard the entire episode up to this point, is honest in trying to reassure Denise, but she actually puts her foot in it, way worse than Jim.
Oh, now listen, it's a big step you're both taking. You're bound to get het up. I mean, we're all fed up with this wedding. We've just got to grit our teeth and get through it.
I can't believe you've just said that.
What?
You're fed up with the happiest day of my life.
You're fed up with the happiest day of my life. Hilarious line. Poetic too. The delivery, the way Denise's voice fragments. Jim is standing behind, not really knowing what to say. Hair mushed up, bedhead. And there's great handheld camera work here that pans from Jim, leaving to put the kettle on, to Denise upset doubly now, not only over Dave, but the home truths that her mother's revealed as well. Denise then reveals that all she ever wanted were the simple things.
All I wanted, right, it's all I wanted was just the happiest day of my life, right, and then just to live happily ever after, that's all I wanted. And him, bloody Peter Stringfellow, he spoiled it.
I know.
I'm going in there. It's doing my head in this.
Yeah, all she ever wanted was the happiest day of her life and just to live happily ever after. Peter Stringfellow is, of course, a reference to Peter James Stringfellow, kind of slimeball VIP lounge businessman who owns several nightclubs, strip clubs, essentially. Barbara agrees, as Denise says, that it's all Dave's doing, and, it's doing his head in, it seems, so he leaves to the kitchen. Shuts the door to the kitchen behind him, and just for a second we can appreciate the peeled wallpaper by the light switch that we saw before in the second episode. Well, we see that in most episodes, but again, I like the detail. I like the gloom as well. Like, normally the lounge is quite well lit. I mean, obviously there's a CRT blaring in the corner, which kind of illuminates things, but here there's just like a solitary lamp or two. It's very dark, actually. It's almost like Dave's going off stage as he kind of goes from the lounge into the kitchen. But before we cut to Jim and Dave, Denise is talking about their prospective stag and hen do's.
Anyway, he was never even bothered about the wedding. He was just more bothered about the stag night.
Yeah, well, you're having a hen night, aren't you, love?
Yeah. And I'm going to have a brilliant time just to spite him at Get.
Come on, blow.
That get, the way she says get is terrific. And here's something as well, right? I mean, Barbara is a loving mother, and, there's nothing a mother wouldn't do for their daughter. But do parents really, blow their own children's noses for them? Especially for a 26-year-old. I mean, piss drunk or not. Is that showing that Denise is coddled slightly, or is it just Barbara's maternal instincts taking full force, trying to control the situation? I'm not too sure about that. I mean, look, if your mum's ever blown your nose when you were really pissed after a night out, then the Royle Ramble pod at gmail.com, let me know about that. So we're in the kitchen now, Jim bringing over a bald kettle to a full tray of cups waiting, reassuring Dave that Denise is like her mother in the way that she always has a go at Jim when she's pissed, but to be fair, she always has a go when she's sober too, which makes Dave laugh and eases the tension. Dave, who opens up to Jim here, saying that he is really looking forward to the wedding, despite him not doing a song and dance about it. And, not doing a song and dance about it, that's kind of Dave's way, isn't it? And again, as he says this, we can hear some clomping upstairs. Anthony approaches out of nowhere, asks if there's any tea going, and Jim asks if he's got radar up his arse. So Anthony comes in the kitchen, wiping sleep out of his eyes, moves past Dave and grabs a cup and adds it to the lineup. And there's something just very quaint about this setup. It's so real. I should say on the table is what I'm talking about. The glass bottle of delivered milk, the sugar bag rather than the pot with the spoon. And Anthony, I mean, I'm obsessed with just the way they dress and design Anthony because, in the grand scheme of things, this is 98, so I would have been 6 there. So obviously Anthony is kind of older than me in the timeline of Royal Family. But it's very relatable, the way he dresses. Like young teenage boys will just have their pants and an oversized shirt, and they've just, nailed that perfectly. In the same way that I guess Jim would sleep in a vest, and Barbara would have her kind of properly fluffy dressing gown, Anthony asks, what is it this time? Obviously, this has happened many, many times before, and may have even happened after this, because this episode, the next episode, the final episode of season 1, is the wedding episode. It's obviously a week ahead. So, therefore, maybe they could have happened again, I don't know. But it's kind of like how episode 3 is simply told Sunday afternoon. As I said in that episode, it's kind of, you can imagine this could have been any of their Sunday afternoons. It's kind of an endless reality of them in the past. And, I'm sure there were many, many more arguments before and after this episode for Denise and Dave. So, Anthony is filled in.
What's happening now?
Well, I don't know if you know it or not, lad, but he's getting married next week.
Oh, what is it this time then? She's got a cob on because I was talking to Beverly Macker. It's the top and bottom of it. Beverly Macker? She's got a gorgeous knockers there. I wouldn't know.
Oh, no, she has, son. Jesus.
Jim's reaction there, terrific. And, the Dave saying the top and bottom of it, is that a subtle reference, not maybe on his part, but maybe on the writers winking to us, about Beverly Macker? I mean, we're always spoken about her knockers, that her top and her bottom, if you will, I don't know. I like that Dave also says that she's got a cob on, which is a very northern term, and even though I'm from the Midlands, like we use that over there, and balm and all that sort of stuff, and Barney and et al. Jim asks Anthony where the whiskey is, and here we can see more of the kitchen. There's a loaf of bread out, a few plates stacked, a plate clock too. And, the way Anthony says, like all kids when asked, oh, I love whiskey, me. I mean, we've heard him say that before with other alcohol. And it's so true. It's, he's probably only had a snifter of it before, but for him, it's something that he loves. And just going back to Anthony's attire briefly, it's kind of hard to work out what he's wearing. It's a large top with almost a skating company logo on the back. And we get a good look at it as he leaves to ask Barb, actually. It's BTKA. Now, there is a BTKA clothing, but according to their website, they were founded in 2016, so obviously not the same thing. I didn't know if it had been like in that kind of, Kappa, Fila, Elise kind of idea, but yeah, again, if you know about that brand, get in touch with me, very, very interested. Dave, we learn, is starving. I mean, he didn't have his kebab like he had last time, and he asked Jim for a bite.
Hey, don't let Aunt Denise see you stuffing your bloody face at a time like this, lad. There's a bit of ham in there. Shove it in a bloody butty.
The way you say shove it in a bloody butty is great, and then we hear that the whiskey is in the pan cupboard. Again, pan cupboard, like that's such an antiquated thing, even though this is only from like 20 odd years ago. There's a crashing of pots as Jim pulls it from the depths, and it's famous grouse. He sniffs it, appreciates it, pours the whiskey into the coffee, fairly liberal amount too. Famous Grouse, of course, is a brand of blended Scotch whisky, first produced by Matthew Gloag and Son in 1896, and currently produced and owned by the Edrington Group. The single malt whiskies used in the famous Grouse blend include the Edrington-owned Highland Park and the Macallan, and its emblem is the red grouse, which is Scotland's national game bird. It has been the highest-selling whisky brand in Scotland since 1980. As a standard price blended Scotch whisky, its main competitors in the home market are Bell's, Teachers and Grant's, and the majority of its sales in the UK are during the Christmas period. With the whisky in hand now, Jim seems to be relishing this somewhat, and asks Dave jokingly if they couldn't have an argument every week. I mean, they probably do, of course, but Dave ignores him, still thinking about his belly, asking if any beetroot is going spare. Anthony passes it across, and he begins to create his sandwich. There's a nice moment of silence here as the teas are ready, and Anthony asks Dave if he's not making him a sandwich as well. Dave laughs, says there's none left as he takes a bite, so Ant goes hunting for that most raw family of snacks, the club biscuit. Jim comes into the lounge now with the offering, lays it on the table, and settles beside Denise, who is now flanked by both parents. Barbara gazing at her intensely, adoringly. Denise with her tousled hair and weary panda eyes that Dave will soon reference. Jim, he plays the game here, and he lies on Dave's part, saying that he's dead upset in there. Denise says she doesn't care, and then an instant later asks, is he? Which is very sweet.
He's dead upset in there.
Oh, I don't care. Is he?
He thinks the bloody world of you, And he's a good lad, a good-hearted bloody lad. Always got his hand in his pocket at the club, not like his bloody old fella. Limp along Leslie.
We learn that at the club, Dave is generous with his money, unlike his dad, and Jim still can't resist to dig into him, calling him Limp-Along Leslie. Now, before this episode, I just thought that was just whatever, a bit of alliteration, bit of an insult. But Limp-Along Leslie is an actual character, a comic book character no less, that Jim may have read when he was younger. He featured in not the Beano and the Dandy, but those sort of things, like what was the thing called? The Hotspur and Buddy. And basically, he's a footballer, Limp-Along Leslie. Here's his origin from comicvine.gamespot.com. Quote, as a child, Leslie's family were involved in a car accident. His parents were killed, but he survived a leg injury which never quite healed. Leslie's leg helped him curl the ball in an unnatural manner. So there you go. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I used to read The Dandy, and they had Owen Goal was the name of the guy, which was great. There's a lot of kind of football protagonists back then. So Jim encourages Denise to drink the coffee, bit of whiskey in it for the nerves, he says. She's not pissed though, she attests, only had about 9. When she says that, Barbara looks at Jim knowingly. And, you know, of course we know Denise is quite a heavy drinker, although to be fair, she's never drunk ethanol, so at least we can give her that. It's too much for Denise, it seems, the wedding and him, but Jim reassures her.
It's just too much for me. A wedding and him.
He's all right, the big long streak of piss.
The delivery of that line is just brilliant. It always catches me off guard. Denise asks what Dave is doing, and Jim says he's actually talking it over with Anthony, which is hilarious. I mean, I wonder what they're actually talking about. Jim doesn't want to dwell any further, though, again being pragmatic, and reaches for the eternal solution. Is anything on the box? Barbara says that's why they get nothing done in the house as no one talks, but Jim counters with them doing nothing but talk, which is kind of fair, at least what we see, especially in regard to Pauline's bloody flexi time, but it was Donna, of course, so he wasn't listening properly, even though he's kind of listening, which isn't too bad for Jim, I guess. Barbara, and they do this a lot in this episode, which I really like, they parallel Dave and Denise and Jim and Barbara. I mean, it happens in a lot of episodes, naturally. But Barbara here then questions why she bothers to keep their own relationship going. And what does Jim retort? Well, he starts picking his own nose. Really digging, too.
Dad, stop picking your nose.
I don't know you can be bothered about me picking me bloody nose with all the troubles you've got.
I mean, you can hear the skin shifting slightly. A little grim. He's then questioned why he hasn't got a hanky in his pyjamas. There apparently isn't even enough room for his tackle in there. Beast my arse, people know in the future, gets referenced as well. Another brief pause. Jim asks if it's all off then. And I love this angle. I mean, the chiaroscuro of it, the light and dark. The show is so good at positioning its characters. And the way that the sad daughter here is bordered, being coddled by both parents is genius. It's just so engaging. And Jim then tries to just clear it up once and for all.
So is that it, kiddo? Is it all off?
I don't know. I'll have to have a think in my head.
Think in me head. Not just think in me head. I mean, where else does one think? But that extra detail just feels so real. So Denise. Barbara then tries to cheer up the situation, and we get into one of my favourite things ever about this show, where they talk about their own pasts. And in this case, we're hearing the origin story of Dave, pretty much. I don't think it's ever addressed how Denise and Dave met, or the courting, or anything like that, but we do get a lot of info here.
Do you remember the first time Dave came round? He never said a word for 3 months. Then he took that old armchair to the tip for us, and it really broke the ice.
Bloody hell, you don't have to talk rubbish sometimes, Barb, you know.
Well, it did.
I mean, Jim, first of all, shut up. That's very rude. But the idea of him not saying anything for 3 months until he takes something to the dump, which is kind of his job in reality, really. I mean, he is a kind of, removal man, as it were. The fact that broke the ice is just hilarious. And Jim then says at least Dave is better than that other dopey bugger, Stuart, who lived in the flats. Gormless couldn't find his own arse with both hands, they say. They're engaged too, which is insane. I mean, I want that prequel with Gormless Stuart from the flats and Denise. Barbara is back in a nostalgic mood after this as well, and we hear about how Dave came with them on holiday to Cleethorpes in a 4-berth.
Hey, do you remember when Dave came to Cleethorpes with us in that 4-berth? He took his shoes off and none of us dared say no.
I bloody did. They were rife. He wanted to stake through them.
Cleethorpes, of course, is a seaside town on the estuary of the Humber in northeast Lincolnshire, England, with a population of nearly 40,000 in 2011. It has been permanently occupied since the 6th century, with fishing as its original industry, then developing into a resort in the 19th century. One little Cleethorpes thing as well. I mean, I normally like to look at famous people that come from these places. There's a list on Wikipedia. Can't tell you who any of them are, to be honest with you. A lot of sportsmen. But here is something of intrigue. On the 22nd of September 1956 at 3 p.m, a UFO was apparently spotted for more than an hour off the Cleethorpes coast. And it was also seen by radar RAF Manby too. And it was a large spherical object of a glass appearance. I mean, aren't they all really? But still, interesting. And this Cleethorpe anecdote, another moment of cluelessness here from Dave too, as we hear that his feet were stinking to the high heavens, Jim saying they deserve the steak, and, he didn't even do anything, and no one really, Dave isn't going to realise that sort of thing. I mean, talking of Dave's smelly feet, let's just wait until we get to the next season where, he brings in the dog shit and Mary sniffs it. I mean, who can forget that? Now, this is such great writing here in this next section, as we learn that Denise has taken account of Dave's issues and bought him some stuff for it from the Avon. I mean, of course, this isn't a grand gesture that demonstrates their watertight relationship, but it does signal towards a caring future. And it's just really funny as well that something a bit gross ultimately becomes a sigil of their love.
They've gone much better now, since I got that stuff from the Avon.
Oh, well, there you see, he does make an effort for you.
The show, of course, wants us to believe that it's a real show. This is all happening. Everything's in real time. They watch real programs and, they go to real places like Cleethorpes. And, that verisimilitude is compounded by the fact that we can hear the police going by in the background for a lot of this section. Maybe hunting for Darren, maybe not. We'll never know. But Barbara, she's always positive. She leaps on this evidence of Denise doing a nice thing for Dave and sees it as sweet and, really kind of pushes it into a direction that it's a good sign for them, which it completely is.
You see, love, there's nothing wrong in looking at someone's threatening bits. It's as long as you're only looking.
I know that, Dad.
Threepenny bit, I mean, historically, a threepenny bit is a former pre-decimalisation British coin worth 3 old pennies. I mean, does anyone else feel this way? So I was born in 92, so, way after decimal day. Old money's so confusing. So the threepenny bit, the 3D coin, as in free, lowercase d, I mean all coins are 3D, aren't they? Usually simply known as a 3-piece threepence or a threepenny bit, was a unit of currency equaling 1/80th of a pound sterling or 3 old pence sterling. It was used in the UK and earlier in Great Britain and England. Similar denominations were later used throughout the empire, notably in Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. But of course the important thing here, rather than the history, is that it's Cockney rhyming slang. Threepenny bit, a tit. A woman's breast, and apparently Beverly Macker has got some proper threatening bits down there, you know what I mean? But Denise just can't seem to get over it, can she? Beverly has just got into her craw, and I like how she says that he's not even that funny, and Jim agrees with her as well. Jim, who seems to be having a bit of a funny tummy himself. The rhubarb at dinner has apparently given him chronic indigestion. It's repeating on him. Gaviscon or Rennies are offered, which is heartburn treatment, and, he deliberates and eventually decides on some Rennies. Barbara dabs out a cigarette and leaves the father and daughter alone. Both of them needing treatment for their heart, I suppose, if you want to be trite. And it's situations like this, I mean, think about the end of the first Christmas special, we're in the bathroom, what a scene, that Jim knows the right things to say.
Come on, Denise, don't worry. It'll be all right. The Rennies will soon do the trick.
And the way that Denise leans into her dad's shoulder as she laughs is very touching. We're then back into the kitchen. Dave and Ant with Kit Kats in hand, clearly not been talking, can't imagine they're going through much here, probably just eating in silence, not even an awkward silence, just silence. I mean, it's very late. And Barbara's hunting for the Rennies. Barbara says that you can't find anything at this house, and then obviously instantly finds them. But does anyone else have that? Well, you can't, like when you're younger, you just couldn't find anything, and then your mum would just find it instantly. Like, it is a remarkable superpower. She then goes over to Dave to see if he's coming in, and he has a nice moment here, telling Barb that there's an out going on, which there really wasn't. And, he had the moment with Jim before as well, where he said, I don't do a song and dance, but I do really care, which shows that he does really care ultimately. And I appreciate that they put both of these in. They really kind of flesh out Dave's character, because Dave becomes... Well, Dave's a very different character in the later episodes, isn't he? Kind of like Homer Simpson I mentioned before. They do just sort of dumb him down. But here he's a bit more three-dimensional. But, it's early days, I guess. Maybe being married to Denise grinds you down somewhat.
Are you coming in, Dave?
Should calm down a bit.
Yeah, it's all blown over now.
Right. Barbara? There's nothing going on there,
I know. That Beverly Macker.
And as Dave reassures her, and Barbara knows, of course, decreeing that it's that Beverly Macker, and as she says that, she checks through into the lounge, just in case Denise hears, maybe? But of course she wouldn't. I'm not quite sure why she does that. I mean, Really, it's Denise that's the issue, I suppose, with a splashing of Beverly and, a Sukhan of Dave's cluelessness, but what parent can really hold their child at fault, Okay, I mean, admittedly, Jim and Barbara do insult Anthony, Jim especially, but what child can hold their daughter at fault, should I rephrase that? And besides, look, people are moving on now. Normality is back as the TV is blaring from the living room, and we cut from someone talking about the supposedly busty Beverly onto a TV screen, and someone is licking what looks like maybe Marmite from the belly button of an engorged stomach. This is late night TV at its finest, and this is just so brilliant about the show. It's like they think we're in one room, we're in a few rooms, mainly the living room, but we can go out, we can't really go many places. So the TV, in many ways, becomes a portal to different dimensions. And, they've done it where it's Sunday afternoon and they watch Antiques Roadshow, or it's tea time and now watch soaps, or it's kind of, it's on a weeknight and they'll watch Who Wants a Millionaire on prime time, or here, where it's like, midnight, where there's just trash on, the kind of stuff that Davina McCall was born to present, that kind of classic content that's at this hour. And I remember Davina around this time as well. I mean, does anyone remember the show Don't Try This at Home? It was on Saturday, like 5-6 o'clock on ITV, and it would just be like stunts and stuff like that, and like people facing their phobias. I remember as a boy, seeing this woman being terrified of bananas, and I thought if it was a trick, I just couldn't understand that. But I was searching high and low because I don't like to leave you guys hanging. I know you're probably as fascinated by British pop culture and history as I am. So I was like, what is this show? And going onto Davina McCall's IMDb, she's got one of those ones where you go on there and you think it's quite a small profile. There's only like 9 or 10 things. And then you realise, it's her as an actor. Her actual presenting stuff is where she's playing herself. And there's like 120 credits. Like, Davina still works regularly, but like Davina was never off the screens in the late 90s. And, Big Brother obviously became a big part of her career as well, but this was before that. So the show that we're seeing on the TV is a show called God's Gift. Now, God's Gift was a British TV game show broadcast for 2 series in 95 and 96. It was produced by Granada Television and presented from the studio floor by Davina McCall in Series 1 and Claudia Winkleman in Series 2, so they're clearly on ITV here. Stuart Hall provided the voiceover for the first series and most of the second, with Jimmy Savile doing the voiceover in later episodes in the last series. Each week, 5 male contestants would vie with each other to win the affections and votes of a female audience or a male audience on gay specials by participating in a series of facetious games designed to test their sex appeal. The winner's prize would be to take an audience member of his choice on a date, which was then filmed for broadcast in the following week's show. The series was broadcast in the early hours of a Thursday morning and was usually repeated in the early hours of Sunday morning on ITV, although not every region took the series. The show's second series was axed after fewer regions decided to broadcast it. So yeah, this is on in the background for most of the episode now, apart from when they're entertaining each other. And Davina, it's interesting, isn't it? Davina, she kind of, because this is before like reality TV really took a stranglehold, and Davina herself kind of ushered in that new era with Big Brother, didn't she? And I should say as well that when I was younger, I was quite a big Big Brother fan. Like, there was only like 3 series that I watched. I think it was like 5, 6, and 7. So 5, you remember, was when Nadia won, and it was where Big Brother got evil, and you had like Ahmed and Kitten, and like just so many good characters there. There's so many podcasts that I want to do, but like I think a Big Brother UK podcast, I could definitely not go episode by episode, but some sort of like recap of the whole thing. I think that would be quite fun to do. So Barbara comes in, brings the Rennies, asks for the TV to be turned off. Jim concurs, doesn't actually turn it off, but agrees that there's only shite on at this time. Anthony comes in with Dave, who I guess, they all might... Anthony comes in with Dave. They all might as well just stay up for a bit. They're awake now. Anthony asks if the Equalizer is on, which apparently was repeated a lot in the late nights on ITV. The Equalizer, for those not aware, is an American spy thriller, originally airing on CBS from September 85 to August 89, co-created by Michael Sloan and Richard Lynham. It starred Edward Woodward as a retired intelligence agent with a mysterious past, who uses the skills from his former career to exact justice on behalf of innocent people who find themselves in dangerous circumstances. Now, A few things about this. Apparently Stuart Copeland, the drummer of The Police, did the score. He's just a gifted musician altogether. People might be aware of his band before The Police, Clark Kent, where he was the lead singer. But he also did the soundtrack to the Spyro the Dragon games, which are some games that I loved as a kid. There's also, of course, The Equalizer. There's a modern TV show, but there's the 2 Denzel Washington films as well, which are mindless trash, but how can you not love Denzel? He's a true star. And the first one's very interesting. The first one is like him... From what I remember, I saw it on a plane many years ago, but it often stuck with me, the kind of dichotomy of it, where it's him going after the Russian mob and prostitute girls and rescuing all that sort of stuff. But there's also a B storyline of him working at a hardware store, helping his overweight Mexican friends to pass the security guard exam. So it's like, it's a very equal show, if you will. Equalizer my arse, Jim says, though, and it's a little tense as Dave sits down beside Denise. I mean, Barbara was very nice to Dave in the kitchen, but now she's still eyeing up Dave somewhat. I mean, she was cool with him back then on his side, but now when she's sitting on Denise's side, it's a bit different. Dave, however, he's not got a chair to take, but still he's going to try and break the ice.
Right, Panda Eyes. They match your top.
I'm not laughing at you, Dave. Still not speaking to you.
That's good, I thought I'd gone deaf.
When he says, I thought I'd gone deaf, we see Barb smile despite herself, and then she glances at Jim, who is still rubbing his stomach. And there are kind of 2 skirmishes in this episode, aren't there? There's Denise versus Dave, and then Jim versus Intern. He thinks he's got liver failure. He's got a pain in his kidneys, but he doesn't quite know where they are. The pain is all moving around his body. Denise says that it was trap win last time, and we learned that they had pork chops earlier, but it might have been that. A doctor is suggested, but Jim dismisses it. And, you may recall that in Series 2, Barbara relays to Denise that Jim's opinion is HRT is horse's piss, and the doctors are raking it in. Jim, we learned, was fine, though, when the football was on earlier, and he lets Dave know that County won 1-0 from a header, Hughes, in the 56th minute. Now, I wonder who they're referencing here, because there are many, many football teams in the greater Manchester area, but not many that end in county. In fact, I think it's only Stockport County that are there, so maybe they support them. I don't know why they wouldn't support City United, or maybe they support a few, maybe they just wanted to watch football on TV, I don't know. But the overall gloomy late-night ambience of the room really works. Like, it really does feel like a whole different enterprise here. And I like the juxtaposition of, like, 3 of the members having been in bed, basically Barbara was ready to go to bed sort of thing, and 2 of them having come out from clubbing, and, there's kind of a dissonance between all the things they're wearing. Denise asks her dad for a cigarette before he joshes it, which is a great slang that, we use in the Midlands as well. And the pain seems to continue. And Barbara posits that perhaps Jim should put some Fiery Jack on it, something admittedly that I wasn't really aware of. Apparently it's an ointment cream, a rubbing cream, that was supposedly discontinued in 2004. Like Pomane, It's something that was in the show and doesn't exist anymore. It's got a real old school packaging. I'm just looking at it now. It's like a yellow and red with a devil on the box as well. And supposedly it stinks the house out, so Denise is not a fan. And the camera angle here is amazing because Jim's at the forefront with his rubbed belly taking up most of the bottom screen, as Barbara looks unconcerned and Denise at the left-hand side of the frame lights up. Jim burps a bit, kind of gruesome sounding, but he feels that maybe that might have shifted it. And Barbara's so loving here. She really says that Jim had her worried. Her eyes are full of concern. And Jim doesn't really respond to this entree, rather saying that what happened there was a dress rehearsal for when he does eventually pop his clocks. Jim is still, of course, cognizant of the situation, loves everyone in the room, wants everyone to get on, so tries to put it to bed at last.
Right, you 2. Are we getting married or what?
Of course they are. Aren't you?
Don't know. What do you think, Dave?
Might as well.
All right, then. Seeing as you've apologised to me.
So seeing as he apologised, Denise accepts, reaches to pick a ring back up, and it's great to see it twinkling beside the Benson & Hedges packet. Jim then asks for more tears, despite them just having one. He couldn't bloody enjoy it for fear of death. And on the TV, we can see Davina interviewing someone, some likely Casanova. Barbara yawns deeply, saying they'll just have to have the brew and go to bed, reminding Denise that she'll have to get the sleeping bag out of the airing cupboard. Barbara then talks about Nana. Of course, Nana's got to be in every episode. Even if she's not in the episode, she's got to be mentioned. She's too good. And she's asked them to take care of Robson as she's off to see Auntie Annie in Blackpool, another family member. I mean, we have heard of Auntie Vi in Middleton. Are they sisters? Are these all Norma's sisters? It's not really cleared up. Is it one of those things that I'm sure you guys had as well where You have tons of aunties that are just kind of old ladies that might be like friends or neighbours of other old ladies. But yeah, she's rang to ask if they can take care of Robson. Robson's a budgie who has barely squawked since Jerome died, and they're another couple. There's another couple that have been together for a long time. So Robson and Jerome, who are they? Well, they're an English pop duo who were active in the mid-90s, consisting of actors Robson Green and Jerome Flynn, and they rose to prominence via the English TV show Soldier Soldier. The duo's musical catalogue was comprised entirely of covers. Their version of Unchained Melody stayed at number 1 for 7 weeks in the UK chart, selling more than 1.8 million copies and becoming the best-selling single of 1995. They had 2 further number 1 singles produced by Mike Stock and Matt Aitken, being I Believe and What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, and 2 number 1 studio albums. A pair of compilation albums followed. And Dave, taking heed from the Robson anecdote, very much his father-in-law's son-in-law relays a story about his mate.
Hey, mate of mine worked in a pet shop, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, but he got the sack.
my.
He got caught with his hands in the trill. Hey, the old ones are the best.
Hey, you daft pair of buggers.
Forget the tea, Flash. Just bring the whiskey.
Jim properly laughing there, love it. And this catalyses the next sequence in the episode where they all entertain each other. And my God, this is just magic, isn't it? I mean, everything about this episode, but especially this move into everyone performing. You know, especially considering how kind of brutal and sad it opens. Jim now just straight up asks Anthony to bring in the whiskey. Barbara pats Jim lovingly, thankful she didn't get the doctor. And Denise mentions Dave's Paul Daniels impression. Now, Paul Daniels, what a figure, right? Newton Edward Daniels, known professionally as Paul Daniels, English magician and television presenter. He achieved international fame for his TV show The Paul Daniels Magic Show, which ran on the BBC from 1979 to 1994. Daniels is known for his catchphrase, "You'll like this, not a lot, but you'll like it," and for his marriage to his assistant Debbie McGee. He was awarded the Magician of the Year award by the Academy of Magical Arts in 1982, the first magician from outside the US to receive it. He also won the Golden Rose of Montreux in 1985. I guess that's a magic thing. He was a member of the Inner Magic Circle with Gold Star, and he has been described as the godfather of magic, and has been repeatedly credited with inspiring many top professional magicians to start in the profession. And I mean, I remember Paul Daniels as a kid. Like, I remember going to Toys R Us, my dad and my brother, and getting like a Paul Daniels magic set that came with like a VHS that we had to like learn all the tricks from, and I don't think I did one successfully as a kid. I mean, look, the cards were too big, I suppose. So the telly's turned down, Davina's on mute for a little bit, and Dave gets into his impression.
Hey, Jim, turn that telly down.
Who's he doing?
Paul Daniels, it's brilliant.
Oh, nice one. Go on then, Dave.
Go on.
All right. That's magic.
That's Orville.
That's bloody Orville. Hey, Rory Bremner's job's safe, isn't it?
Yeah. Orville, of course, a reference to Orville the Duck, who was the most famous puppet often used by the ventriloquist Keith Harris, and was named after Orville Wright, one of the Wright brothers. Orville being a green duckling who wears nothing but a nappy with a large safety pin on the front, and who speaks with a falsetto Yorkshire accent. There's also a reference there to Rory Bremner, who is Roderick Keith Bremner, who is a Scottish impressionist and comedian, noted for his work in political satire and impressions of British public figures. He's also known for his work on Mock the Week, award-winning show Rory Bremner Who Else, and sketch comedy series Bremner, Bird and Fortune. Dave then makes reference to Spitting Image, with Paul Daniels being in the clip with Debbie.
Hey, you remember that time they had Paul Daniels on Spitting Image, and he was in bed with Debbie, and he balanced a glass of milk on the top of his head. And he goes like that, and he whips his rug off, and a glass of milk stays on his head. He goes, "That's magic!" I love that, mate. Not a lot.
I'm sure you two are a bit bloody simple.
And I like this here. I like that the writers show that Dave and Denise have something between the two of them, something that both of them agree on, both of them enjoy, and it's kind of their own thing. Spitting Image, of course, is a British satirical television puppet show, first broadcast in 1984 with over 18 series. The series featured puppet caricatures of contemporary celebrities and public figures, including British Prime Ministers Margaret Thatcher and John Major, and other politicians, Reagan, the royal family, and the series was the first to caricature Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, as an elderly gin drinker with a Beryl Reid voice. One of the most watched shows of the 1980s, Spitting Image satirised politics, entertainment, sport and British culture of the era. At its peak, the show was watched by 15 million people. The popularity of the show saw collaborations with musicians, including Phil Collins and Sting, and the series was cancelled in 96 after viewing figures declined. It was brought back, though, last year on the 3rd of October 2020 on BritBox, featuring Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, and it seems to have made no impact at all. Barbara asks if Spitting Image is the puppet thing, saying she doesn't like puppets. Jim says she likes Muppets, though, and I mean, I don't need to explain who the Muppets are to you, do I? But why not? Created by Jim Henson in 1955, they're a namesake of the Disney now-owned media franchise that encompasses television, film, music and other media. They originated in the short-form TV show Sam and Friends, which aired from 1955 to 1961, and following appearances on late-night talk shows and in advertising during the 1960s, the Muppets began appearing on Sesame Street, and then their own show, The Muppet Show, from 1976 to 1981, which received 4 Primetime Emmy Award wins and 21 nominations during its 5-year run. Now, this is the weird thing here, and go back and watch this, and maybe let me know what you think about this moment, because just after this, Jim says, "Come on, Barb, I think it's time for bloody bed," and she doesn't say anything. She looks at Jim briefly, but then she's just stock still, effectively in contemplation after a single glance in Jim's direction. Denise comments on it being cold, and Barbara, the eternal maternal, is back here now to look after a now certain son-in-law, stating that there's some extra blankets in the air cupboard. And I love that Jim says that the sleeping bags are made for Arctic conditions, and Denise says, well, yeah, they might as well be. And following that, we get into some more history, as Jim says that Dave should count himself lucky.
Hey, well, when I was courting your mother, I couldn't stay behind an airhouse. It doesn't matter how bloody cold it was. I had to bloody walk home.
Well, you didn't have a car, did you?
Well?
And this is intriguing, because Barbara's kind of making an abstruse point here. Jim says I had to walk home, i.e., I had no future mother-in-law willing to lend me airing cupboard blankets. I had no future father-in-law who'd give me the last bit of ham out the fridge. The car is kind of beside the point. I mean, yeah, he could have driven home, but it's just an interesting sort of dissonance there, isn't it? And Barbara, as we said many times, you know, she can perk herself up out of nowhere, paying Denise affection, who is now fully lent into Dave, like the young lovers they are. And it's interesting from this angle as well, from the sort of the front-facing angle, we can appreciate more of Denise's going-out get-up, the tights and near-knee-high boots. The whole black palette of it is great. Barbara says that she's always sad when they call it off, which again hints obviously towards earlier disagreements and subsequent resolutions. The clan all cheer. We hear Jim's trademark chant of triumph as he sups the whiskey and ruminates for a second internally before dipping once more back into time. And we're getting so much info here about the family. For instance, we learn that Jim and Barbara have been together for 27 years.
How long have we been together, Barb?
27 years.
27 years, Dave, and we've never had a crossword.
What are you on about, Jim?
So 27 years, which means they would have been married in 71. And if Denise is 26, it means she was born pretty much after they were married, probably pregnant on the honeymoon. But then, a few episodes prior, they mentioned the fact that they both were aware of each other around the Kennedy assassination, which would have been 63. So were they courting? I mean, because she was with Charlie Rogers at the pictures, who Jim knew, because he made reference to the... she referenced the bushy eyebrows, but he obviously knew who he was as well. So I'm not saying the dates are off. I'm just saying I guess Jim and Barbara would have known each other for a while before they got together, which is quite interesting. Because you'd imagine back in the day at least... Okay, maybe I'm just being a bit stereotypical. Maybe this wasn't how it was. But, you know, I've watched enough Ken Loach films to know that, you know, normally you meet someone and then you get hitched quite soon after, you know. Jim's in a good mood, though. The whiskey's clearly doing its work, and he begins to sing.
How to handle a woman is to love her, simply love her.
Big soft ape. You haven't got a clue, have you?
And the song he's singing there is How to Handle a Woman, with the music written by Frederick Lowe and the lyrics by Alan J. Lerner, and that's from Camelot, the musical, and it was made famous, and the first live performance was by Richard Burton, and it was actually on October 1st, 1960, when he first performed that. Now, it's hard to kind of work out what Barbara says here. Looking into the script, she says, "You big, soft aper," which you can kind of deduct what that means. I was trying to find some stuff online, like is there actual definition of what that means? The best thing I could do was Urban Dictionary. It says daft apef, which is a northern, specifically Lancastrian term for a fool. And funnily enough, they say roughly equivalent to the modern term Muppet, which is something Barbara appreciates as well as Jim. Jim rues the fact that he wasted his singing talents and could have been the Mick Hucknall of our estate, he says. And again, is that saying we're on the same estate together? Is it like how people say our kid up north and it's just mine? Or, don't know. Mick Hucknall as well, who, I kind of thought he was older than he was. He's only 60. Is an English singer and songwriter. Achieved international fame in the 80s as a lead singer and songwriter of the soul-influenced pop band Simply Red, with whom he enjoyed a 25-year career and sold over 50 million albums. Hucknall was described by an Australian music magazine Rhythms as, quote, one of the truly great blue-eyed soul singers, while Q credited him with, quote, the most prodigious voice this side of Motown. More singing now, a lot of singing in this last third, as I'm sure you know. And it's nice that Denise urges Jim to sing this song because, as we've said, there's quite a big age gap between Denise and Anthony. So this is something that Jim would sing to Anthony. And obviously this is something Denise remembers as well as a kid, probably hearing it down the hallway or whatever. This was kind of one of the songs again, I don't know about you guys, but definitely for me when I was younger, my dad would sing songs to us in the bath. And my sister, I guess me and my sister have a similar age gap difference to Anthony and Denise of about 8 years. And the songs, I remember him singing to her and stuff like that. And, it's just lovely. And I love that it gets brought up. And this is such a sweet song. The lyrics to this song are fantastic. And Jim's performance as well. He really sings this. He really kind of gets into the kind of spirit of it. His hands out conducting and delivers that final note with some real vibrato.
I sing Dave that song he used to sing, Anthony, when he was a little baby.
Oh, no.
God.
Oh, yeah, it's lovely.
Hey, you like this?
Oh, come on.
Nice one, this. Walking down the street in ragged clothes is not a joke. People laugh at me, ha-ha, and call me beggar 'cause I'm broke. Well, there's one little lad, and he calls me dad. Shake hands with a millionaire.
The song is called Shake Hands with a Millionaire by Arthur Tracy, and it's from the 30s. The whole thing is terrific, actually. Got some great lyrics. Here's the follow-up stanza after the one we just heard. I'm rich with sunshine that his smiles and kisses have brought me. His eyes are little gems that sparkle with joy. There's nothing in the world that gold could have brought me to take the place of you, my laddie boy. Arthur Tracy was born 1899 and passed away in 1997. Wow. He was an American vocalist and actor, billed as the street singer. And his performances in theatre, film and radio, along with his recordings, brought him international fame in the 1930s. Anthony's listening, he's enjoying it, he's a little embarrassed, hiding beneath his fingers. We can see his BTKA shirt here again. And it's just such a wonderful sentiment in that song, and particularly ironically fitting due to Jim's obsession with money. And as I say, as he ends it, he really holds on that note, you know what I mean? He's really performing for the crowd. And buoyed by this, despite it being 1 o'clock in the morning, as Barbara reminds him, Jim asks for his banjo, and Anthony gleefully departs to fetch it. And the next shot, it straight cuts to Jim pouring some whiskey in his cup, with him declaring the Royals 24-hour party people, a reference perhaps to the Happy Monday song, to which the great film about the Hacienda and Tony Wilson is named. Barbara laments, but concedes. Jim asks Dave if he's ever heard him on the old banjo, and he informs him several times, adding the suffix James, of course. I'm sure once you've seen it once, you could never forget this whole banjo. And yeah, Jim plays the banjo, as you're about to see, really well too. Jim has a lot of layers to him. He isn't just this kind of spiteful miser, you know what I mean? He does laugh a lot, and, he can play an instrument, and he likes to perform, which is great. And the roles were clearly written. I didn't really know the history exactly with the Royal family. Hopefully I'll learn more if I ever get to interview any of these people. The roles were clearly written for Ricky and Sue, post-Brookside, so perhaps they knew that Ricky could play, and they put this into the character of Jim, because, we see the banjo a few times. And what about the banjo as well? Well, the modern banjo derives from instruments that are thought to have been used in the Caribbean since the 17th century by enslaved people taken from West Africa. Written references to the banjo in North America appear in the 18th century, and the instrument became increasingly available commercially from around the second quarter of the 19th century. Since many enslaved people of South America were brought there by the Portuguese, they might have brought the instrument with them. Several claims as to the etymology of the name banjo have been made. It may derive from the Kimbundu word embanza, which is an African string instrument modelled after the Portuguese banza, of a hula with 5 two-string courses and a further 2 short strings. The OED states that it comes from a dialectical pronunciation of Portuguese bandora, or from an early Anglicization of Spanish banderia. Barbara says that when Jim dies, she'll bin it. Anthony perks up though and asks that he wants it for himself. Doesn't want it to carry on the tradition though, wants it for the car boot. And what a reversal too. I mean, consider that we start in the sleepy confines of a late-night bedroom as a full domestic is exploding downstairs, and now we're about to enter a hoedown.
1, 2, 3, 4. I want a girl, just like a girl at Mary, dear old dad. She was a girl, and the only pill that Daddy ever had. A real old-fashioned girl with eyes of blue, the one who really loved no one but you. I want a girl, just like a girl at Mary, dear old dad.
Jim does his little laugh and goes into a spirited performance. It's passionate, George Formby-esque. I mean, I love the sound of a banjo. Those delightful chords. Everyone getting in on the percussion as well. Everyone getting in on the lap percussion as well. Singing a song with lyrics by William Dillon and music by Hamry Don Tilzer called I Want a Girl, just like the girl that married dear old dad. Great song, love this song, never heard this song before. And interestingly, like the song that he was just singing, both take the perspective of a child on board. So the first song we heard was a dad singing about, the delight of his son. And in this one, it is someone who is looking at the relationship of his mom and dad and, wanting someone as good as the girl that his dad married, i.e. his mom. And of course, we'll hear Jim playing again when he accompanies Joe, as Joe's singing his drunken lullaby. What a scene that is as the camera pans off, and what a final quote there from Darren as well. Jim asks for any requests, and Barbara says, yeah, let's go to bed. Denise asks her mom to sing what she sings when she's washing up, which is a song that she probably knows because it reverberates from the house all the time by the looks of it. We learn that Denise shouldn't sing, though. She offers to sing, as apparently she had an attempt at Whitney Houston at the pub, and the landlord barred himself. Barb then goes into You Were Made For Me, a song by Freddie and the Dreamers from 1963.
You were made for me. Everybody tells me. Oh, I'm not doing any more. You take it.
It's nice.
All the trees are meant for little things that sing and fly, and the sun was burning up in the sky. Little eyes were never meant to cry, they were meant to see.
Great acting here on Sue Johnson's part, as someone who can't really sing. Like, I understand maybe she can't really sing in real life, but just the way she plays it, the hesitancy, Dave looking off screen to Ant cringing and gritting his teeth. I mean, it's so real. The fact that Barbara forgets the lyrics, mumbles her way through certain sections. It even ties nicely back into the beginning of the episode as she touches Denise's face and says, little eyes were never meant to cry, they were made to see. I mean, the lyric is actually pretty eyes, but again, it works as a fumble. She grows in confidence, gets a decent reception at the end. You can't whack it, can you? Jim says, which is right. The banjo then comes out again as Anthony gets up to the plate and starts doing a kind of entrancing shoulder blade dance. Like, I'm sure we've all had this where families are sitting round and everyone sort of gets their talents. Like, I remember my brother, who similar frame to Anthony when he was younger, sort of he would sit in a certain way, would cross his legs, but sort of invert them, and then he'd like walk around on his knees and stuff like that, like a crustacean. It was quite disturbing in retrospect, but we all have those knacks, don't we? And Anthony is supercharged from this and acts what they're singing next. Barbara announces that they need to go to bed. I mean, it is very, very late. Jim calls her a killjoy, says he's enjoying himself, says he was going to put one bar of the fire on, which shows, as we've explored in previous episodes, that he is aware of kind of the stereotype that he is. At times he is. Barbara gets Anthony to grab the banjo, fetch the sleeping bag from upstairs, which he then unceremoniously dumps on Dave and announces that he's going to bed. They all say night. Denise calls him Muscle Man. Dave is still kind of glancing at the TV. I mean, there's so many details, of course, throughout this show, but one of the realists to me in this episode, and I'm sure anyone who's ever stayed over at anyone's house or a friend's sofa or something, one of the realists to me is that, Dave doesn't have a pillow. So he just says that he'll put some cushions together, which Barbara echoes, yeah, put some cushions together, as all mothers tend to do. And, we've all been there. Barbara offers to leave the big light on for a while. Dave says yeah for the minute, but Jim snuffs that out as he'll forget. Denise goes off, kisses him, calls him Casanova, and Dave just can't really help himself.
Good night, Casanova.
Night, Bev. Denise.
Hey, don't push it.
Denise leaves out into the hall, and we get our first shot proper of what you see, I guess, when you go into the Royal home. There's a cabinet on the left with some coats, beige wall, umbrellas stacked. Nothing revelatory, but this is the Royal Ramble, and it's important to discuss these things. Dave unties his shoes, begins to undress beside the TV in the gloom, and unbeknownst to him, but clear to us, is that someone on the TV is doing the same thing. So, I imagine this happens a lot in God's Gift, just men kind of stripping on stage to try and woo potential late 90s ladies. And I don't quite know why they did this, the writers, but just as a bit of fun, I guess, the synchronicity of it. I don't think it's meant to say anything about the show or anything, but it's just kind of quite funny to see as Dave is kind of, getting into his nevers. There's also a prospective Romeo doing the same on there. I kind of like that echo, really. And here's something you don't see in media either. Dave takes his shirt off, unties his shoes, all that sort of stuff, and then he grabs his dick and rearranges it within his boxers. I mean, the verisimilitude of that. Every man knows that. But you don't really see that in TV, do you? Like, just someone rearranging in that way. I mean, we all do it all the time subconsciously or whatever, but it's just kind of cool to see that. Like, I finally feel represented on screen. I finally feel seen, as it were. It's a good sequence. He lies down, he sort of strains. Well, we initially think that he's straining at the TV from an angle, but he's actually just straining full stop. Squeezes a fart out, sniffs, squeezes out another. The Foley, the sound design there is great. You sort of hear it muffled within the sleeping bag. Dave, I should say as well, another nice touch was singing You Were Made For Me. And, it's interesting to consider the message of that song as well. Are Denise and Dave, are Jim and Barbara really star-crossed? Are they really made for each other? Probably not. But is anyone? Probably not. So Denise comes down after he's farted in the gloom, gets into the sleeping bag. Really nice resolution. Love that they did this. Love that they're building up. They're really showing that these are a couple that are very affectionate for each other. It was probably all a bit of a rigmarole, wasn't it? In the sense that they knew Denise was going to come down. And again, I love that she comes down kind of similar to Anthony, kind of just wearing a big baggy shirt over her knickers or whatever. She gets into the bed with him, or I should say, gets into the sofa with the cushions, with the pillows.
Feel your big pillock.
Hey, get in here for a cuddle.
Oh. Dave?
What?
Have you farted?
1-0.
Asks, have you farted? He says 1-0. Like Hughes with the header in the 56th minute, maybe for Stockport County, at least for County. And then the episode ends. Interestingly, in the script, she just says, come on, Dave says, come and give us a cuddle. She says, have you farted? And then it ends. There's not the 1-0 on the end. I mean, the 1-0 isn't crucial, but I just appreciate that one final line, just showing the sort of juvenile nature of Dave. It's so kitchen sink, to the utmost degree, really, right down to the fart in the sleeping bag. And it is just a majestic episode, really one as well that shows the emotional palette of the show, how it can go from just happy sing-songs, and there's a lot of singing in Royal Family, actually, when you think about it. There's a lot of sort of, convivial, sort of genial, kind of, almost revivalist at times. So yeah, guys, that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. And as I said at the start of this show, it's been a long break. I haven't spoke about the Royal Family for maybe 4 months or so. And it's been a joy putting these notes together and recording this and editing it and, just putting it all together. So finally, if you enjoy the show, there are many, many ways you can support. Of course, you can tell a friend. Please, we're just trying to build numbers. So if you've got any Royal Family fanatics out there, or even no one that's never watched the show before, and maybe needs a companion piece to help explain all the complex lore, go through and tell them that. Follow us at Royle Ramble Pod on Twitter. You can also get in touch with me, the Royle Ramble Pod at gmail.com. That's the Royle Ramble Pod at gmail.com. All the links are down below in the description. But especially on the email, I love to hear from you guys. If you've got any answers to any of the questions that I posited, any of the mysteries, or just what's your opinion on this 5th episode? What moments stick out to you? What's your favourite song, etc.? What do you think about Jim's banjo playing? What do you think about the Tory tea mug? We might have cleared that up forever, but still, what are your hypotheses on that? So yeah, check us out on iTunes as well. Leave a review, 5 stars if you'd be so kind. Write something down below. Still haven't had a written review getting more and more 5 stars, but still not got a written review. And also YouTube as well. But just to reiterate as well, at Royle Ramble Pod, the Royle Ramble Pod at gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and I promise it will be 2 weeks. There won't be another 4-month gap. We'll be doing the wedding episode, which I'm really, really hyped to get into. That's going to take a little while to put together, but exceedingly excited. So yeah, guys, go back, check out all the old episodes. Keep watching the Royle Family, and if you've run out of the Royle Family, watch Early Doors, and then if you finish that, get back on the Royle Family. So yeah, this is Tom. As always, until next time, bye.